A powerful man once said that the most dangerous threat to a nation isn't an enemy abroad. It's the silence that grows when truth becomes inconvenient. And that silence was shattered in one extraordinary moment on Capitol Hill. Congressman Jerry Nadler didn't raise his voice or pound the table. He simply told the truth the media too often whispers, that most of the political violence tearing this country apart is coming from one side. The room went still, the cameras kept rolling, and even the FBI director sitting across from him couldn't find the words to push back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Director Patel. In the wake of the tragic murder of Charlie Kirk, Donald Trump said, quote, "Violence and murder are the tragic consequences of demonizing those with whom you disagree, day after day, year after year, in the most hateful and despicable way possible," close quote. I would note for the record that Donald Trump has famously demonized practically every person he has ever disagreed with, and therefore, using his own logic, he has put their lives at risk. I should know, about 2 weeks ago, when I announced my decision not to decision not to seek re-election, many people on both sides of the aisle, including the chairman, offered me well wishes and thanked me for my service. Donald Trump, on the other hand, took to Truth Social to call me a, quote, psychopathic nutjob, among other things. Yesterday, I received a threatening note filled with anti-Semitic comments and hateful attacks that mimic some of the same language used by the president. I am sure many of us on this committee face similar threats every day. We have seen political assaults on both the left and the right. The attack on Charlie Kirk, the attempted assassination of the president, the murder of the Democratic Speaker of the Minnesota House, the assault on Paul Pelosi, and the attack on the Capitol on January 6th, for example. Director Patel, do you agree that there is political violence from both the left and the right?
There's too much political violence.
Do you agree, yes or no, that there's violence?
There is too much political violence based on ideologies from either side.
From either side, okay. Are you aware of the study by the Cato Institute, a well-known conservative group, that found that 69% of the violence is from the right?
I'm not familiar with that study.
You're not familiar, okay. I would commend it to you. Are you aware the administration has threatened to use violence as an excuse to crack down on liberty and freedom of speech?
Say that again, I'm sorry?
Are you aware the administration has threatened to use violence as an excuse to crack down on liberty and freedom of speech?
Nobody at the FBI is doing that.
I didn't ask you about the FBI, I said the administration.
I speak for the FBI.
I would like to enter the record an article from today's New York Times titled, "Trump Invokes Kirk's Killing in Justifying Measures to Silence Opponents." In the wake of Charlie Kirk's killing, President Trump and his allies have laid out a broad plan to target liberal groups, monitor speech, revoke visas, and designate certain groups as domestic terrorists. I ask unanimous consent to insert this into the record. Thank you. Politicizing the murder of Charlie King to go after free speech is not a legacy I believe Charlie King would have wanted. Moving on, I want to address another topic. The FBI has traditionally played a key role in prosecuting public officials for corruption. But I fear that at a time when the president is accepting planes from Qatar for his post-presidential personal use, issuing pardons to major donors, and personally profiting from the office of the presidency, the FBI may be abandoning its commitment to investigating public corruption. Since its creation in the wake of the Watergate scandal, the Public Integrity Section has been one of the crown jewels of the Department of Justice, investigating and prosecuting corruption among the nation's public officials and acting as a key safeguard against politicized prosecutions. This section's work has been supported by an elite squad in the FBI devoted specifically to rooting out corruption. But according to reports, the Public Integrity Section has now been decimated, and the FBI's Public Corruption Squad has been dismantled. I would like to submit for the record a New York Times article entitled, "FBI Dismantles Elite Public Corruption Squad." I ask unanimous consent. Thank you. These actions are an invitation to corrupt politicians to break the law, since they know that the government is asleep at the switch. Last month, Senator Warren and I, along with dozens of other members of Congress, wrote to you and Attorney General Bondi expressing grave concern over your decision to effectively legalize corruption and to politicize prosecutorial decisions. And he asks unanimous consent to enter this letter into the record. Thank you. I don't have time today to walk through all your questions, all of our questions and concerns, but will you commit to answering this letter in short order so that we can understand what factors led to this decision and how it has impacted the ability to hold corrupt officials accountable?
I will review your letter with my team and respond as soon as I
You
can.
will respond. Thank you. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director, for being here. I appreciate.
What made this exchange so gripping wasn't just the facts. It was the fear behind the hesitation. Nadler wasn't playing politics. He was holding up a mirror to a system that has learned to look away. For years, violence has been rising. Assassinations, hate-fueled attacks, threats against officials, journalists, and citizens who simply speak their minds. And every time the nation demands answers, someone changes the subject, insisting it's a problem on both sides. But Nadler refused to let that myth stand. He pulled out the receipts. He asked the FBI director one simple question. Do you agree that political violence exists on both the left and the right? It sounded harmless enough until you realized what he was really asking. Because behind that question was a mountain of data and an uncomfortable truth that many in power pretend not to see. When Nadler cited a respected study showing nearly 70% of political violence originates from the right, the silence that followed said everything. Instead of acknowledging the numbers, the director played it safe. There's too much political violence from either side. A rehearsed answer, a non-answer, and the kind of evasion that tells you exactly how deep the fear of accountability runs in Washington. Nadler didn't stop there. He pressed again, slower this time, forcing the director to either accept the data or expose his unwillingness to confront it. Still, the same dodge came back. No direct admission, just the vague comfort of both sides. But the truth doesn't live in the middle when the evidence points one way. The data doesn't care about partisan comfort. It just tells a story of a rising tide of extremism that's being excused in the name of political survival. And that's when Nadler turned the focus to something even more unsettling. The way tragedy itself is being weaponized. In the wake of a high-profile killing that shook the country, the narrative was twisted. Instead of unity, it became a justification for new powers to monitor speech, target groups, and label dissenters as dangerous. Under the guise of preventing violence, the machinery of control began to expand. Nadler exposed how the rhetoric of security was being used as a shield for silencing critics. And the FBI director sat there, careful, cautious, unwilling to challenge the script that IT was more than political theater. It was a warning. When grief becomes policy and fear becomes a tool, freedom starts to shrink. Nadler held up a newspaper article right there in the hearing, reading aloud lines that laid bare a strategy to use one man's death as a stepping stone towards censorship and surveillance. You could see the unease ripple across the room, because deep down, everyone knew what he was pointing at. Power that hides behind tragedy is power that no longer fears limits. Then came the shift, the moment when Nadler connected the dots between violence and corruption. He reminded the chamber of something most Americans don't even know exists. An elite FBI squad once tasked with investigating corruption at the highest levels of government. A team born out of the Watergate era, created to ensure no official was above the law. And yet, according to reports, that very squad has now been dismantled. Quietly, without explanation. Think about what that means. The unit that once pursued bribery, influence peddling, and abuse of office, gone. The watchdog that protected democracy's backbone, muzzled. Nadler didn't just call it troubling. He called it dangerous. Because when oversight disappears, corruption doesn't just grow, it metastasizes. It becomes the air everyone breathes in Washington. And when you combine that with rising political violence, you don't get chaos by accident. You get control by design. That he reminded the director that the same system dismantling oversight is also allowing leaders to profit openly while in power. Private planes, favors, pardons for wealthy allies. It's not hidden anymore. It's normalized. And when the FBI, the supposed guardian of integrity, no longer has a squad dedicated to policing that corruption, who's left to hold anyone accountable? The silence after that question was deafening. This wasn't just about one administration or one scandal. Nadler was describing a slow, methodical corrosion of the very idea of justice. The line between government and self-interest has blurred so completely that it's hard to tell where power ends and privilege begins. And when the people meant to investigate wrongdoing are stripped of the tools to do it, it isn't incompetence, it's intent. That's the part most viewers miss. The real story wasn't just Patel's hesitation or the data Nadler cited. It was the connection between intimidation and impunity. Violence and corruption are not separate storms. They're two fronts of the same hurricane. One silences voices through fear. The other ensures those who benefit from that fear never face consequences. Together, they form a perfect circle that keeps ordinary citizens powerless and the powerful untouchable. Nadler spelled it out in plain terms. Political violence doesn't just appear, it's fueled. Fueled by rhetoric that paints opponents as enemies. Fueled by leaders who thrive on outrage. Fueled by institutions too scared or too compromised to call it what it is. And when that violence erupts, it's used as justification to tighten control even further. Protecting freedom, they call it, while they chip away at its very foundation. The brilliance of Nadler's questioning was in how he made it impossible to separate morality from accountability. He didn't shout. He didn't grandstand. He simply drew a map from violence to silence, from silence to corruption, and from corruption to collapse. Every evasion from Patel only proved his point further, that the truth now depends on who's willing to say it out loud. By the time Nadler wrapped up, the hearing had turned into something larger than a political exchange. It was a reflection of where the country stands, a place where data can be dismissed if it's inconvenient, where oversight is treated as optional, and where violence is normalized as long as it benefits the right people. He looked the director in the eye and asked for a commitment to answer his letter on public corruption. It sounded procedural, but it wasn't. It was symbolic. A last attempt to make the system acknowledge its own decay. That moment, calm, methodical, but heavy with tension, summed up the danger we face. A democracy can survive anger. It can survive disagreement, but it cannot survive indifference. When those in charge of protecting justice refuse to name what's breaking it, the system starts to hollow from within. And by the time citizens realize how far it's gone, the safeguards are already gone too. This is why Nadler's confrontation matters so much. Because it wasn't just about violence statistics or corruption reports. It was about the cost of pretending everything is fine. It was about how easily truth can be buried under both sides' rhetoric and how that false balance gives cover to extremism. It was about how democracy dies, not in one dramatic moment, but through small acts of avoidance by those sworn to defend it. When the hearing ended, the headlines barely captured the gravity of what just happened. They focused on the exchange, the quotes, the back and forth. But what they missed was the pattern, the way the pieces fit together. The growing violence, the dismantled oversight, the normalization of corruption, the refusal to speak plainly about where the danger lies. Put together, it's a blueprint, not for chaos, but for control. And here's the part that should make every viewer stop and think. This isn't ancient history or political gossip. It's happening now, in real time, under the bright lights of government hearings and the quiet corridors of power. When watchdogs are disbanded and truth is treated as a partisan threat, the slide away from democracy doesn't announce itself. It just accelerates. The real question isn't whether political violence exists on both sides. It's whether we'll have the courage to recognize where it's truly coming from and stop pretending the scales are even. Because pretending they are is how injustice hides. Pretending they are is how corruption survives. And pretending they are is how fear replaces accountability. When Nadler said, democracy can't survive on autopilot, it wasn't a metaphor. It was a wake-up call. Every institution that's supposed to protect truth, from the press to the courts to the FBI itself, is only as strong as the people willing to tell the truth inside them. Once silence becomes the safer choice, corruption becomes the easier one. That's the danger we face now. Violence is no longer just physical, it's psychological. It makes people afraid to speak, afraid to act, afraid to believe their voices matter. And when that fear becomes normal, democracy starts to feel like a luxury instead of a right. Nadler's words weren't comfortable, but they were necessary. He reminded the country that power without accountability isn't strength, it's rot. Maybe that's why his final appeal felt less like politics and more like a plea to the public. Pay attention. Don't let fatigue win. Don't let the noise drown out the facts. Because the moment we stop caring about who holds power accountable is the moment we hand that power away. And that's where this story stops being about Washington and starts being about us. The choice to stay informed, to question what we're told, and to refuse to normalize violence or corruption. That's where the real defense of democracy begins. It's not in a headline, or a hearing, or a single vote. It's in every decision we make to care when it's easier not to. If you've made it this far, you already know how rare honesty has become in public life. And if you believe the truth still matters, then do one small thing that helps keep it alive. Hit like, subscribe, and share this video. Because awareness is power, and silence, as Nadler proved, is the one weapon that only works if we let it.